Welcome back to Leading Indicator, everybody. My name is Zaid Admani, and in today's show, we are talking about Apple's struggles with AI and their future roadmap. What are they going to do to fix this? So in today's show, we are talking to Phan to discuss the struggles at Cupertino. Trung, thanks for being on the show.
Phan, former CFA charter holder, current holder of 3 Apple shares.
That's right. That's right. That's all we need to have opinions on Apple.
No, let's do it. I have strongly held opinions based on foundations of questionable knowledge, but let's get into it.
Right. Well, I want to talk about the WWDC that happened about a couple weeks ago. And, Apple made a lot of big promises at WWDC last year. I feel like this year they kind of didn't really bring it up because of all the heat they faced from not living up to the promises from last year. What was your takeaway from WWDC this year, and what are your thoughts on what Apple is trying to do with AI by just not acknowledging the lack of innovation here?
Absolutely. So this year, the big thing was a liquid glass thing with their kind of UI overhaul. And the funny thing about Apple is, no matter what they do, people are going to instinctively dislike it, right? Or joke about it and make fun of it. The liquid glass was just such a memeable moment because it looked like they'd ripped off Windows Vista. And if you actually look at their last 3 WWDCs, so you had mentioned obviously last year, they literally shipped vaporware. The 2024 WWDC had products that did not work and did not exist, and they had to pull ads that they had run for Apple Intelligence, which is crazy if you think about it, right?
Right.
Apple is famous for, particularly under Steve Jobs, just they're not going to show you something unless it's deliverable. And then the year prior, they actually delivered something, Apple Vision Pro, but it was a consumer flop. Technical breakthrough, huge consumer flop. And so this year, I would say actually dialing it back probably made more sense for them because they didn't have an AI product. Craig Federighi, the head of their software, was interviewed by Joanna Stern from Wall Street Journal, and he basically said, we're working on Siri stuff, but we got nothing now. So I to answer your question, I'm happy they didn't overpromise, right? They're
right.
Good at their UI is their thing, and that's they kind of went back into what they're good for, or what they're the best at, right? Is a human-computer interaction. And, obviously I made a bunch of my jokes, and I'm sure you guys made a million jokes, but at the end of the day, that's what they're good at. And if they don't have something ready for game time, as we learned last year, don't announce it.
Yeah. So they struck out 2 years in a row, right, with the Vision Pro, and then last year with the vaporware stuff, which still was shocking that they did that. So they just kind of played it safe, just, hit a single, hit a double, and tried to just revamp their UI. But then, what's shocking to me is how bad Siri has been for so long. There was an article in Bloomberg a couple weeks ago talking about how Apple is looking to reshuffle their organization. They're trying to send their AI chief into early retirement. What do you think? Should Apple just abandon Siri at this point because they've been trying to make it work for so long? It's become a laughingstock at this point. Should they just abandon Siri and potentially partner with OpenAI, or kind of, strengthen their partnership with OpenAI, or maybe even Google to use their AI technology and their voice assistants or whatever there is, and incorporate that into the iPhone instead of trying to make Siri a thing?
Well, to answer your question directly, you mentioned the article by Mark Gurman. So that was like a bit of a nuclear bomb in Cupertino when they dropped that about 4 to 6 weeks ago, the article, because it detailed in over, I think it's a 5,000-6,000 article word piece about the AI failures. And they actually had a line specifically talking about Siri, about why Siri was so hard to update. And it's because they're basically trying to rejigger old code with this new LLM technology. And as you kind of mentioned, Apple's AI roadmap is super interesting because they acquired Siri in 2010. It was Steve Jobs' last big acquisition, basically before he died. And when he got previewed Siri, he was so enamored by it that he called the founder 24 straight days in a row until he incepted the guy. Like classic reality distortion field.
Yeah.
He's like, "You are selling this to me."
Hey, fellas, never give up. That's the lesson,
never
right?
give
Fellas,
up, yeah.
never give up.
Do not
Keep sliding the DMs.
Just keep sending those DMs, and that's what Steve Jobs did. But he died within a year of acquiring Siri, and that's why when people joke now, nothing's happened to Siri in 15 years. It's because the product, the Steve was the one that saw the potential, and then once it went to Tim Cook, and mind you, right, you criticize Tim Cook a lot of things. That's a whole nother episode. But under his stewardship, Apple's gone from 300 billion to 3 trillion, right? 10x the company. It's and the volume of product they've done, whether or not quote unquote new, they've moved an infinite amount of product. But back to AI, should they replace Siri? So 2018, JG, who you'd mentioned, he was a former head of Google's AI. They poached him. Apple did, and the problem that JG had, I can't even pronounce. If you can find his name, I don't want to pronounce. It's John, I think Girardi. I don't want to say the last name incorrectly, even though I just did. But culture clash because he doesn't have the veteran leadership, right? Like he hadn't been at Apple for 20 years. Right. So even though he's a big name in Silicon Valley, Apple has its own insular culture. So he was wrestling for resources internally, and even though he reported to Tim Cook directly, he and his personality was quite laid back. Apple was actually quite cutthroat, and he never actually meshed with Apple's AI resources, and he also didn't think chatbots were a thing. So they got completely sideswiped by ChatGPT, which brings me to the other point you brought up. You said, should they just partner and deepen their relationship with OpenAI?
Exactly.
So let me ask you, Zay, like, where is that relationship right now, and how do you view it? And I'm glad to give you my thoughts.
Well, I mean, right now it's pretty standard. You know, like if you ask Siri a question and if it can't answer it, it'll kick it to ChatGPT. It's a pretty, basic integration. But what I would like to see is like a much more thorough integration where like ChatGPT can have access to information of other apps and things like that, where you can fully give it control of your life and your phone. But Apple hasn't done that, or they're refusing to do that. I'm not sure what the case is. And I just wonder if they just get to the point where they're like, hey, we're so far behind that we're just going to give in to OpenAI, or maybe even Google, kind of like they did with search, right? They just gave search to Google. They make $20+ billion a year with Google being the default search engine.
100% margin, effectively. 95% margin payment from Google.
Exactly.
It's insane.
Do they adopt a similar strategy with AI? Because Apple's going to be the king of hardware for a long time. Everyone, when you're on the iPhone ecosystem, you're not leaving, right? I'm not leaving. Do they just partner with one of the leading AI technology companies?
To your exact point, I believe there was kind of something that came out of WWDC. They actually did talk about OpenAI there. So that was basically two things I kind of noted on the AI side from the WWDC. One was actually they talk about deepening a relationship with OpenAI, as you had mentioned. And the other one was that they've actually allowed a software developer kit for AI products directly on the hardware, which is a big deal. Because if you remember 2007, Steve Jobs makes the iPhone announcement in January. The product goes for sale in the summer. There is no app store. Steve Jobs wanted everything done in the browser in Safari because he did not trust third-party apps.
Right.
Eventually, I guess a year after his announcement, so call it January 2008, he greenlit it. He was convinced by his team they should have third-party apps. They could still vet it within the App Store, which is the problems we're all seeing now with Apple. Right. They have such ironclad control, which is actually being loosened now. But at the time, 2007, it's a very, very legitimate concern. Man, you ever have a Windows PC in the early 2000s? God. Bro, you open that thing and you look at it wrong and it gets a virus, right?
Oh, dude, yeah, you had all these like virus scanner softwares to try to not get viruses, and you still get it.
Well, that's also what happens when you're downloading Soulja Boy songs. So that's also on you, right? So
yeah,
it's not
LimeWire.
Yeah, it's not particularly. It's not just Windows' fault. But so the logic behind App Store makes a ton of sense at that time. Still does, but to a lesser degree. 30% tax seems pretty heavy-handed now, as we're seeing. But that's a separate question. So they're allowing developers to work specifically on the phone with AI products. So we might see 1,000 AI products bloom. The one downside being it's on device, so you're going to have a lot less processing power versus, as you had mentioned, OpenAI connected to the cloud. So yes, I think
it's also Apple's local. It's Apple's model. It's not,
right. It's
model.
Apple's local model,
right?
Which actually brings us a good segue to the thing that you guys had asked me about previous. Basically, come on this episode. What is their M&A possibilities,
Yes,
right?
let's talk about that. Who should they
So,
buy?
well, so to your exact point, so they're sitting on 130 billion in cash. But historically, I've never done big deals. The biggest deal, is, as you well know, is Beats for 3 billion in 2012.
Shout out Dr.
Um,
Dre.
yeah, exactly. But Dreets, I love the origin story. Dre and Jimmy Iovine.
Yeah.
So this is the origin story. It sounds made up, but Jimmy Iovine's walking down the beach. I guess they both own homes in the California beaches or L.A. Just walks over to Dre's house, and Dre's got a bunch of shoes, and Dre's like, "Listen, I got this new sneaker deal I'm doing." And then Jimmy Iovine just looks at me and goes, "Dre, let's do speakers, not sneakers." So I don't know if that's true. That's from his a documentary, Defiant Ones. Everything I see on the internet, I believe is true. So
Yeah, I believe it's
yeah,
true.
I'm just gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
But so actually, interestingly, that's their largest acquisition. Culture clash. So this is a big thing about Apple. We just kind of mentioned with JG, the former head of Google.
Right.
This is Apple's a very specific type of culture. So one of the reasons they've never done large acquisitions is because, well, there's three main reasons. One is it's a culture clash. Number two, they already have the number one brand in the world, so they're not acquiring a brand. Like Amazon acquired Ring, the doorbell thing, but Amazon's brand is not strong as Apple. Amazon's a strong brand, but like Apple wouldn't acquire Ring and then have a Ring product. They would rename it Apple, right? Or they just design it internally. The third thing is they don't need revenue, right? They make so much from the iPhone that what they're acquiring is basically they do acquihires ultimately for emerging technologies. One deal that did fall through was apparently they were in talks to acquire Tesla with Elon.
Right, a while back.
But Tesla was worth 50 billion at the time. That was 95% ago, right?
Right.
But Elon wanted to become CEO of Empire Entity.
Right.
Wait, I mean,
shoot your shot. Shoot your shot. Yeah.
Also, who knows what that timeline would look like now, right? They probably wouldn't have. They might have the best car out there, right? But anyways, I'm losing my track. But so Apple's history does not a lot of big deals over $1 billion. They've actually only done 3. We mentioned Beats. The other one was they bought Intel's mobile division. So again, that was to get a technology to build their own chips. So that was actually kind of successful, but also some culture clash. And then the other one was they invested $1 billion into Didi, the Uber of China. That basically went to zero. And that was also part of just Tim Cook trying to be nice with the CCP. That was kind of ultimately what that deal was about. But so the options, what do you think the options are with the 130 bill cash? I know you've seen some names because they have AI options. OpenAI is off the table now.
OpenAI is off the table.
Yeah.
But what's shocking to me is that you contrast that with what Zuck is doing, right? Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, they're just writing blank checks and handing out max contracts to anyone that has an AI engineer title in their name, right? And he's not afraid to just drop in a boatload. Whereas Apple is just being so casual here, and that's why I'm just like, are they working on something in the background? Are they making an offer to a Perplexity or something like that, or maybe even Anthropic, try to bring them in and help them catch up to the players like Google and Meta here and Amazon? So that's I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you named I think the main target. They've spoken according to reporting from Bloomberg. Again, Mark Gurman, who is the Apple whisperer.
He's the Woj of Apple.
Yeah, he's the Woj of Apple, right? And the Gurman bomb. But no, he mentioned Perplexity. Perplexity is valued at 14 bill. They could probably top that off at 2025, which is a drop in the bucket for them, right? These guys are doing 100 bill a year in buybacks.
Exactly.
130 bill cash they're sitting on. So that's very much in the realm. I would say Anthropic's probably off the table because they're at 65 bill. That'd probably be a 100 bill acquisition to please the investors, and that'd take up the entire cash pile. Mistral, the French, the French LLM startup, they're actually very good at local and small models, and they're only valued at 5 bill. So they would be very interesting at a 5 to 10 billion acquisition. I would not be shocked if that happened. Having said that, Apple has a lot of issues with the EU, and that's a European champion.
Right.
So they might not, Macron literally might actually block that deal. I'm not even joking, right?
Yeah.
So you have Perplexity, Mistral, Cohere is a Canadian lab worth about 5 bill. That could be interesting. They have some. I think they were founded by one of the Google research paper writers, so they have a lot of research chops. But yeah, there are things on the table. Mir Murati, the former COO of OpenAI, Thinking Machine Labs, they just raised at a $10 billion valuation with no product. I don't even know if they have a roadmap, but
Right.
she's obviously who she is, and she
Exactly.
can command talent. They have spoken to Apple. That never progressed, but that could be on the table. So a lot of things here that I would not be shocked at all if the next 6 months they made acquisition. You mentioned Zuck. There's got to be a little bit of urgency on Apple's side. I would not be shocked at all.
Well, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. I think they have to do something just to satisfy investors here, because I think the investing community is getting nervous. People are just thinking like, what is Apple going to do? They're falling behind. I'll end with this though. So the big news a few weeks ago was OpenAI buying Johnny Ive, former Apple superstar product designer, for $6.5 billion. OpenAI bought Johnny Ive's company called IO for $6.5 billion. OpenAI is in some lawsuit. There's some lawsuit happening regarding the trademark of that name. But what do you think that they're working on? See, I thought they were going to be doing maybe smart glasses or some sort of headphones or something. But according to some court documents, in this case, they're not doing a wearable or AI headphones. What is your take on what they're working on? And do you think that this is going to be what takes OpenAI to the next level as a consumer company?
No, so do you remember when that announcement was made? People were losing their mind. Somebody said
With that
they're
cringy
working,
video.
Yeah, somebody was working on they're working on an OpenAI vape. So that's what I heard. No, I saw that one. So shout out. I'll give love. That's from Tweet Davidson, hilarious meme account. But no, so actually, I might have misread those court documents. So I did read the first 2.5 pages. If I'm being honest, I just wanted to get.
You didn't use ChatGPT like everybody else.
I didn't. Yeah, so I think you might have. This is my reading. It could be incorrect. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I actually think they were working on an earpiece.
Okay.
Because you mentioned IO. So IO, the letter I, letter O, lowercase, is the name of Jony Ive's startup that was spun out of love from his design firm.
Mm-hmm.
And allegedly, I'm not allegedly. This is I'm saying allegedly. Google, in their moonshot factory, Google X, had incubated a company called IO. Confusing, I get it.
Yeah.
It's IYO. That's all capital letters, okay?
Right.
And so that company raised 60 mil, spun out of Google X, and they're working on an earpiece. And allegedly, that earpiece would get people off the screens and probably look very similar to the movie Her.
Right.
Which incredibly was set in the year 2025. Insane.
Yeah, they saw it coming.
Spike Jonze, man.
He saw it coming.
So IO, allegedly, earpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And the thesis of the product is post phone screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're alleging that OpenAI had looked to invest in them. They'd done multiple meetings.
Mm-hmm.
They had a prototype product. And then suddenly they stepped back from interest in investment. Sam Altman tweeted 2 days ago about the lawsuit.
Yeah.
He says it sounds like a spurned investee. He was saying that this gentleman and this team they're looking at, he's like, we're very cordial with them. We're very interested in their product. It didn't work out. We're quite upset about the lawsuit. Of course, he's going to say that.
Right.
Again, all this is alleged. He said, she said. But it sounds like they're working on an earpiece. And it sounded like a month before the OpenAI Johnny Ive announcement, they had met with the team and received and learned about some trade secrets. So I don't know. That's all out there. So earpiece.
OpenAI always gets involved with drama here. That's just like kind of like their deal.
Yeah. And to your larger question, I know we're supposed to wrap here. I'll leave it with this. Is like, yeah, OpenAI realizes the same problem that Zuck realized with the iPhone. You ultimately you don't want to be gate kept, right?
Right.
And that's why Zuck has spent basically past decade with the VR glasses, with Meta, renaming the entire company about the metaverse and building his own hardware. He did not want to be at the whim of Apple.
Right.
Because he did not want to pay the tax or told that he couldn't do software a certain way. Granted, they're still $1 trillion company.
Right.
But Apple still was the gatekeeper, which is insane when you think about it. And OpenAI is trying to, with Johnny Ive, go around that. And Johnny Ive, if you've listened to his interviews in the past couple months, he's expressed regret about, he hasn't said it directly, but he's expressed regret about his involvement with the iPhone.
Right.
Like he created the most addictive device ever.
Yeah.
All right. And he knows that there's been a lot of unintended consequences.
So I see that, but I still think that it's gonna be really hard to move away from phones. I mean, I'm really curious to know what OpenAI is working on. Like, I don't know what it could possibly be besides it being something like smart glasses or something. But it's just gonna be so hard to get people away from their phones because the phone can do so much. I mean, it's so helpful to have a screen.
Screens are amazing.
Right.
No, it's like no, screens are amazing and they're awful, right? It's a whole experience. But I agree
Exactly.
with you. It is people have been saying is like, well, first of all, nothing will ever beat iPhone as the greatest consumer product ever. It is
Exactly.
literally the right. We know this. 2 billion
Exactly.
devices sold, over $1 trillion in lifetime revenue.
Right.
Nothing will ever beat that. To your point, will something replace it? I agree with you wholly. Is like at this point, it'd literally be like a Neuralink chip. Like I
Exactly.
just don't see a piece of hardware
Right.
reaching. I mean, and that's super speculative, right? We're talking about 30, 40, 50 years until probably full safety. But the idea is that, yeah, the phone being replaced. And the last thing I'll add is this. Imagine your Apple, right? And you're going to, I know there's a lot of trade war questions around where these things are designed.
Mhm.
And the book Apple in China, you probably been talking about, Patrick McGee came out, how Apple
Great
basically
book.
captured. Yeah, exactly, right? Basically, Apple and China we're so close to build. There's probably no one else could ship it. Imagine you're Apple now, and you find out that OpenAI has an order for 100 million hardware products. You're probably going to those suppliers, being like, "Listen, you're either going to work with us,
Right.
right? It's like it's going to be hard for OpenAI to ship 100 million units, just frankly,
Exactly.
of high
Exactly.
of that quality." Anyways, so much more to talk about.
So much more to talk about. I mean, we'll leave it there, but I appreciate you being on the show, riffing about Apple, and I mean, we'll probably have to do a part 2 because there's a lot that we left on the table.
Absolutely, I'll double my shares by then, so I'll have more skin in the game.
Same here.
Six Apple shares.
I might pick up an iPad as well to help boost their revenue. You know. I
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
it, Trunk. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.